Welcome, everyone.
It's lovely to see you guys.
Yep.
I should start with notices, hey?
Yeah, probably.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. We're going to talk
Hopefully
about...
you are too.
Hopefully you enjoy it.
We're assuming that since you're here, you might want to look forward to it at least.
Yeah. But before we start, I'll just go through a few notices. Well, firstly, we'd just like to say hi. It feels like we've just seen you almost, a lot of you. It wasn't that long ago we were in England, but we've been really busy since we last saw you. You might notice that we have video recording equipment this time, so you are being videoed at this event. And Jesus in particular has done a lot of work to get this video set up portable enough that we can take it around the world with us we've got 2 yellow Pelican cases that we fit all of our audio and video in, minus the stands that you see. The stands are sent ahead of us. But there's been a lot of problem solving and troubleshooting and even engineering the camera mounts and stuff that's happened. So it's really exciting for me to now be using all of this new setup that we're finally getting going. And
we didn't have a chance to test it before we left, so...
No. We
got the cameras a week before we left.
That's right. We were literally working on this issue since we got home last time till we left this time. As well as that, we've been quite busy at home doing other things. We've set up our recording studio again at our home base, and so we have a small area that seats about 50 people where we can have regular discussions again, which is really exciting. And there's also a lot of stuff going on in the not-for-profit that we are founding members of called God's Way. And if you would like to see a little bit of what's going on in God's Way, there is some tables up in the back of the room, opposite where you would have checked in. And there's some leaflets there and stuff about different projects that are underway. So if you want to have a look at them in the breaks or in the mornings before you come, you're welcome to do that. Yeah. How many of you are from England?
Okay.
Yeah, quite a few, hey? I would say about 70%.
Yeah.
And who's from the north?
North. So when we say north, how far
well,
north?
where's the north?
Midlands, north?
Yeah, the Midlands and north, yeah. Yeah, a few of you.
Yeah.
And who's from, the south?
South of the Midlands.
South of the Midlands.
Majority.
Yeah, the majority.
More.
Yeah. No, we're just surveying a little bit because we're already thinking about when we'll come back and where we should go to. Yeah. Who's come from another country?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
there you go.
Lovely to have you guys.
So we know we could go through all of Europe, but there's quite a lot of you from different places in Europe.
There's a lot of Europe.
There's a few. There's also one from South America, isn't there? Ed Nelly.
Ed Nelly again. That's lovely. Yeah. Well, I hope you have the chance to get to meet each other a little bit as well if you haven't already met. Yeah. We are planning to obviously have 3 days here with you. We'll start at 11. We'll break at lunchtime, 1 o'clock, and just for a half an hour each day. And we aim to finish at 4. On Sunday, we're going to have quite a bit of pack up to do, so we will finish at 4 on Sunday. Well, the best laid plans and all that. We always say that, but we do need to be out of here at a reasonable hour. So, we are thinking we would like to have a walk and a picnic for whoever's still in the area on Wednesday. Who might be still in the area, just so I get an idea? Okay,
so it's probably 40 or 50, maybe even 40. Can we, if you leave your hands up, we can, we just need to make arrangements because it might be raining.
Yeah, there's about 30 probably.
30 or so.
Yeah.
It's England, we might be raining.
It might rain. We have to plan for that. But my plan is to let you know Sunday afternoon what the plan is. And hopefully we'll have the most up-to-date weather forecast then, but we'll probably have to have a contingency for rain as well. But hopefully we'll have a walk in nature somewhere and
But it won't be like we did in Austria for those who were there. It's not going to be like a 18K up 3,000 metres or something.
No, we won't. We'll keep it sedate this time. It's all access. Well, I don't know if it's all access, but we'll try and make it much more.
Not too strenuous.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Who among you is joining us in Portugal in about a month? Oh, yeah, quite a few. So we have a couple of things that need to go to Portugal that won't fit in our already at the maximum baggage allowance bags.
Yep.
So if anyone might have space in a bag, would you see me just at lunchtime? And we can have a chat about that possibility. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, some of the spaces might need to be quite large.
Yeah.
There's a monitor that has to go. It's about 5 kilograms, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, like I said, see me in the break.
Yeah. One of the things we had to do setting up the tech is making sure that when we go from country to country, we could still use our tech in each country. And that meant getting power cords from Australia to each country and getting a lot of other things, cables that I knew were reliable to each country, and mounts, camera mounts and speaker mounts to each country. And so we've got now 5 copies of all of that in different countries. And we're still in the process of sort of building the copies, so...
The kits.
Yeah. But what our goal generally is that we can sort of take our kit to the country and then set up a venue, anywhere up to a couple of 100 seat venue, in a manner that's replicatable in each, like at least in each continent, I suppose you would say. So that's been a fair bit of our effort over the last 6 months, has been going into that. Yeah.
A lot of figuring out as well as implementing. Yeah. Lots of orders. Yeah. Do you want to ask about that, Chris? I'll bring you a mic, okay?
Testing. It's just a curiosity question. Why did you decide not to go back to Dameron?
Just because we're trying to find a venue of a larger size, because there's a number of things we're trying to sort out, Chris. Firstly, we're trying to sort out that we want to allow for a bit of growth, and Dameron, with a little bit of growth there, it would have ended up being too small for us, the hall. This, as it turns out, this hall's probably not going to be suitable either because we can't use the stage. It's too creaky. It makes too much noise in the sound. So we had to make all that decision yesterday. But we're looking sort of for a venue that's like one of our venues in Australia that we like going to. That's a 250-seater that we can regularly go to, but we still haven't found the one we want in the UK. So any of you who might know different ones, but it needs to have different features that we would like and also allow us to set up all of our equipment. Yeah. So that's why we're not going probably back to Dameron, even though the hall was quite nice for us.
Yeah, it was nice.
It's a bit out of the way though for accommodation and other things like that for a lot of people as well. So we were trying to get towards more of a bit bigger town as well. But we're still experimenting in different countries with what the right venue is, really.
Yeah. Our ideal thing is, short of having our own venue, our own learning centre in each continent, would be to have a venue that we can come back to each year and just rebook. It saves a lot of time.
Booking venues for us means going through... Normally we go... In this area, I think the girls who helped us...
Anna, do you know how many you went through?
100 venues?
6?
Yeah, over 100 to find this venue. Yeah. And, each of them have their upsides and downsides, obviously. So that makes it difficult every time we are planning a new trip. If we've got to go through 100 venues, it's a lot of effort. And so we're still looking for the ideal venue for us,
Yeah.
So when we find it, we'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll invite you. Now, as you came in, hopefully you received a gift bag. Yeah.
Yep.
So in that bag, that's a gift from Jesus and I, but we have to thank a few
lot of people
who helped us to fund that gift.
Yep.
But in that bag, you will find 4 volumes of the Padgett Messages. And the specific volumes we've given you are quite special to us, I think, because back when Padgett received the messages, he had a friend, Dr. Stone, and when Padgett received them, he didn't do much with them in his lifetime, but after he passed, Dr. Stone took it upon himself. He'd been present when many of the messages were received, and he decided he wanted to publish them for the world to read. And so he put them together in the volumes that you have, the first two anyway. I think he might have been a little involved in the third, and he'd passed by the time the fourth was compiled. But the first one in particular, it's... I find it very nice to read because it's all the volumes are presented according to topics rather than date order. And so you find a lot of the very important truths of the universe and truths about God and the human soul in the first volume. So that's why we wanted to give these ones in particular to you, because they are lovely to read. And also the Church of the New Birth, the Foundation Church of the New Birth, who is in charge of that publication, one of their tenets is that they don't change anything. Part of their constitution is that they must preserve the messages as they were first published. So you'll actually find a few typos and a few grammatical errors and things in there, but that's because they feel we need to keep it exactly as Dr. Stone put it together, or as the first publishers put it together. So we like that because we know some other versions are getting altered and changed. So that's why you have those ones as a gift. And
There's a few unfortunate things we must discuss about it, though.
Yes, yes. So can I just say what we're working on at home, and then we'll talk more about those ones.
Yeah.
So at home, we are actually working on... The Foundation Church has actually given us their files of the books before they're published, and we're actually working on not changing the text, but just doing a reformat of the text, making it a little more readable. You'll see inside of that where Dr. Stone wanted to add emphasis, he's put everything in capitals.
So he's yelling at you, right?
In the modern world, that's like yelling at you. That's not what he meant. But we're going to try to alter that text so that it's bolded rather than capitalised, and just add a date to each message. We won't change the order, but we'll add a date so you have a little bit more context there as well. And also you can cross-reference it with other publications more easily. So that's underway. We've got a very small team of people working on that job, going through and looking at any grammatical errors, any spelling, obvious typos and things, and changing them, and also then reformatting the text. So we hope to have sort of a divine truth publication of the 4 volumes, and the Foundation Church of the New Birth is very happy for us to do that. So that's wonderful, and it's been great to work with the Foundation Church on this project, actually. The unfortunate thing is, and what you may encounter, is that they use KDB Publishing, which is a part of Amazon, and they're printed on demand, these books. Unfortunately, in the shipment that we received for the UK, there was quite a number of problems with the actual publishing. So the books you have all been sorted to be the best quality of what we got, but we actually received quite a few that had damaged spines, damaged covers, excess glue in the books, rips, tears.
So we've apologised if they fall apart on you within a year or something of usage.
I would actually advocate for, if you aim to read them a lot, which we hope you do, to put some kind of coating or cover and some kind of reinforcement of the spine. You can see even my copy.
That's where the damage is.
As I've been travelling with it, it's gotten a bit battle-worn already. So, just adding... It'll probably help preserve the life of the book, But hopefully Divine Truth ones will come out in a couple of years as well, so you'll have them.
So our aim is to give them away at every venue.
At every event we hold,
so that everybody who comes to an event ends up with a copy. Now, to do that, we've had to... obviously, we've got donations from all sorts of people to help us do that. So here, Emma's...
Where's Emma?
Where is it? There.
Emma has funded a lot of these books.
Emma, could you stand up? I know you don't want to.
Yeah.
You have Emma to thank for your books today. So. Thanks, Emma.
And Can we also say that Anna, very kindly, when she knew we were giving this gift, she took the initiative to get the bags made that you have. So that lovely calico bag that you have the books in is from Anna. Anna.
Yeah.
And inside your bag, these people all did this independent of us. Inside your bag, you'll find a lovely prayer card, of which I don't have one, but that's a gift from Tim and Julie here. This has a lovely print of nature on the front of the prayer.
Yeah, that's
And the prayer cards that I handed out just before we started are actually from Tim and Rebecca. So,
Thanks, guys.
yeah, thanks, guys.
And I must say too, obviously going through all of these books when we received them, it was a huge effort because they all had to be checked for quality and so forth.
And then sorted into
And there were
individual
600
sets.
books to check, so that's around about 600 kilograms of books had to be stored somewhere and so forth.
Yeah.
And Anna had arranged for all of that, and also there were a number of people involved.
So I know Tim and Rebecca spent, and Simone, and who else? They were your main helpers, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Have
They
helped
went
sort them
through
all.
every book. These are like old friends to them. Every book you have, they've looked at all of them.
Checked it out.
Checked it out. Made
And
sure.
they, we had to give a report back to the church to let them know about all the damage that we received, so that they could do something about it in the future. Yeah. So that was a large effort actually on their part.
It took many
them
hours,
many days.
And the shipment came in not all in one go, and so there was lots of shipments and spreadsheets and checking, and it was a huge effort. So thank you guys for helping
Thank
that
you for
to
that.
happen. Yeah. We're going to talk about the messages on this tour quite a bit, but something lovely about taking quiet time in your day to read the messages is that you get to have the lovely spirit friends who are involved in the creation of these messages come and be with you when you read, when you sit and take the time. So, we just encourage you to spend some time. We know book reading is really going out of fashion, but we're trying to bring it back.
And sitting down for any longer than 10 minutes seems to be going out of fashion as well. So
we actually want to create some books based on the modern divine truth teachings, what we've taught in the last 10 years as well. So, but this is a lovely place to start.
And also it's the help you'll receive when we're not here. And it's just something to consider. That's why we wanted to give them to you. We'll talk about that more over the next 2 days or so.
Yeah. All right. Now, even more basic is, does everyone know where the bathrooms are, the toilets are? Yeah, you would have seen them as you came in on the left, coming in.
And there's overflow toilets, where are they?
Yeah, and there's extra toilets if anyone needs them. Hello, come in.
Come in.
Has anyone got a spare seat for the newcomers? There might be a few at the back anyway. There's extra toilets, I'm told, in the dining room, which is you sort of come out, straight out, and dogleg around to my right as I'm facing you.
Do you go past this building?
No, you kind of go between the next two buildings there, and it's on your left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it says dining room on there. But hopefully there's enough loos. But yeah.
Yeah. There's not a lot here in the venue.
No. There's something else about the venue I needed to say. We'll talk about microphones.
Bit of safety first. We have to do this. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Obviously, emergency exit straight out the back there. But if there is something happening out the back there, the only other working emergency exit in the hall is actually on this side here at the front. So that's where you would have to head. We want you to be especially careful if you're on this side of the building, because along there's cables and everything. You'll see them in front of the fourth row. And we don't want you to trip over them for a start, and then secondly, we don't want you to tread on them. Obviously, if you tread on them too much, they'll break, and then we'll have to get won't be able to do sound. So if you can just be mindful that you come out through the centre here, where you can. But The problem with doing that during our seminar is that obviously the camera shots are there. So you'll find if you're in the front area here and you stand up like fully, you'll be in the shot as you walk out. So we'd like you, if you could just crouch down and walk out or something like that, if that's possible for those in the front here, if you need to leave for some reason.
Yeah.
And we'd also like you to have mobile phones off, thanks guys, or at least in silence.
Yeah.
You're allowed to record anything you want.
That was my other notice.
So
if you want to take an audio recording, the best place is put it underneath
one of the
speaker.
speakers. And so you can put them on the ledges next to the speakers if you wish, because that'll be the loudest sound most probably.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to do that whatever you want. So if those of you who want to do that, we're going to give you a few minutes now to do that. If
to get that
you want to.
going.
We will also be providing a recording.
But we should say that we don't actually have a team of editors or anyone who's going to create a video or audio of this event. So it's really down to Jesus and I at this stage. Hopefully some editors are coming along.
Yeah.
So it may be a little while before you see a video of this event.
Yeah.
From us.
Yeah.
Mind you, you're also free to take video of this event. So as you would have seen in the email I sent, so a couple of people are taking their own video.
Yeah.
So obviously, as per your participant release that you would have all read before you came, because I asked you to in the
Who actually read
event.
it before you came?
A few of you.
A few of you.
You are agreeing to have yourself recorded by being here.
Yeah. If you can't agree to that, then we need you to leave.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be dealing with takedown notices on my sites in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we're all should be relatively happy to see your likeness. By the way, for the most part, it's mostly Mary and our likeness. You'll see the only camera really taking your likeness is this one up the front, and it's so far away from all of you that you might not see yourself.
You have to squint to
you
make
have to
it.
sort of, so it won't be very big.
It's just so people get an impression of what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like to do that just so that people have a feeling of like they can see how open we are and honest we are about everything we present.
And I should pass on from our friends in Australia, in God's Way, many of them sent their love to you and were so excited to kind of meet you through the recordings as well and wanted to send their love to you.
Yeah.
Their excitement for whatever we discussed together.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about microphones.
Microphones.
Thanks, Chris. Just as a reminder, many of you have already had this instruction before, but basically the microphones are on all of the time. So anytime you're handling a microphone, if you bump it, touch it on yourself, it comes through the speakers and into the recording. So please don't do that because it affects everyone else's listening experience, both here and in the later recording. Please, when you are speaking, use a microphone, so wait for a microphone to come to you, and we will indicate the people who should get the microphone. When you are speaking, please hold the microphone to your chin and your chest, and that is so that we get a good reading on your voice. Otherwise,
But if you find it's going pip, 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 pip all the time, and you can hear that, then you'll need to back it off a bit. Yep.
Just that some of you get very quiet when you get the microphone. So that's why we often say put it on your chin. But if you've got a booming voice, you can put it out a bit. But once you go out here, it's useless. So, and if we give you a little pointer, that's what we're referring to while you're talking. All right, who would like to run mics? Yes? Probably need to sit here if you're going to do it. And Ed Nelly?
So Nelly will have to find.
Yes, you could
You
go
can go
to the
back if you wish to. Yeah.
If you're happy
Just
to.
be mindful of the cameras again when you come forward. When people,
So you just as soon as you get in front of the
so
camera,
you sort of got to
crouch.
squat down a bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. And just a reminder for you guys, don't give the microphone to anyone until we say.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to you, my love.
Have we finished with everything? I think we have, haven't we?
Yeah. Any questions about logistics or any of that? No.
No.
It's
Very
good.
Good. Okay. What are we going to talk about? I probably want to start with a little story, if I can. In terms of, if you look at the world today, you can see there's a lot of problems, isn't there? I think pretty much everyone on Earth can probably see there's a lot of problems now, can't they? I doubt whether there's many people on Earth who would be blind to that, and think that the Earth doesn't have its problems. And when you look around at all the problems, people come up with all sorts of arguments as to what needs to be done to sort these particular problems out. So, there's suggestions that are made that seemingly seem quite practical at times, that people make suggestions either politically or medically or in economics and all those kind of things. They make different suggestions in all their fields of endeavour. And they all seem sometimes quite practical, in terms of, that might help the fact that we've got problems. But it does seem, doesn't it, like our problems are getting worse. Have you noticed that? And I don't know what it's like for many of you who live here in England, but when we come here, we see it must be hard for the average person to make ends meet now. And you can also see that has a tendency then to cause unrest as well in people. And this is something that's getting replicated all over the earth as well. That there's more and more unrest. And of course, you can see, we've still got our wars occurring. There's still occurring, the war in Ukraine. Obviously, there's tensions constantly between nations as well, isn't there? And many of them are so tense that could easily inflame into world war, actually. If you look at the tensions between India and Pakistan, you look at the tensions in the Middle East, and you look at the backers of these, these tensions that occur, these are big countries who have had a history of, supplying arms and munitions to make these events occur. But then you also look, if you look over the last 6 years, we've all been probably touched by COVID, haven't we, in some way, whether you've had it yourself or just in the way that it's influenced your life one way or the other. You notice how everything's quite changed, hasn't it, after that? You notice how people seem a bit less friendly, generally. We were talking to one airline stewardess and she was saying that since COVID, people have been a lot less friendly when it comes to flying, and she's found it quite difficult to stay with her job because of it. And this is something that we've noticed too. People have become more insular, more reserved, as a general rule. And then, we have the issues associated just with the fact that we seem to be having these countries manufacture not only the disease, but also the means to cure it. And so there's a lot of emphasis on making money out of people's misfortune. And this is increasing, the desire to make money out of people's misfortune. All of you are now being leveraged as money-making machines. And you can see that even just with the way you interact with your mobile phone, right? You can't open a weather app without seeing like 25 ads while you're looking at the weather. And it's getting pushed at you constantly. You're being bossed into it, actually. And this is just some of the problems that are still here and also seem to be increasing. These problems seem to be increasing. And then you get the personal problems too that come from all of this. So we notice that a lot of people, particularly young people, are finding it really hard to even socially integrate with others, to have conversation without it being, and without being able to have, they can't have conflict without withdrawal or attack. There's no way of resolving conflict, it seems. That their social skills are degrading on the whole. And you see it more and more prevalent the younger the generation generally. We see it, the younger the generation of the people we meet, the more sort of self-absorbed they are and not connected with the world really. They're only connected with their own little, you could say, clique or clan of people, mostly their peers, and very few other people, if at all. Some of them only interact with other people through technical devices. And then you've got the growing problem of AI, where everyone's becoming reliant on machines and almost treating the machines as if they're people. And then we've got the growing problem of how much power and energy is being used by all this tech, and therefore the world is becoming so thirsty for power, literal power, like electrical power, that we don't care about the degradation to the environment and what's happening with the environment with regard to that either. And so the very earth we're living in is becoming quite damaged. And this is something we see a lot when we're travelling, how it sort of creeps up on you, where, something that 50 years ago you would have been shocked by, because it would have to be presented with what's there now. 50 years ago you would have been shocked, but whole vast landscapes being cleared, for example, you'd be shocked. But because it's happened gradually, it's like nobody really notices, right? And each generation doesn't really notice the degradation that their generation is causing for the next generation. And so we've got these sort of, like, I would call it a mountain of problems, isn't it? Really? To resolve. And the average person on earth feels pretty much that it's all unresolvable. And probably many of you have felt that when you look at all these problems, you think, well, what can I do about it? I'm just one person doing my thing. I've got to eat, and the only way to eat is to go to a supermarket for me most of the time in a modern society. And then they wrap everything in plastic, and so I'm contributing to the world's degradation in terms of that. But I've got to eat, so what can I do? Surely we need to, there needs to be some change. Most of us know there needs to be some change even on that little thing, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to be changing. In fact, if anything, it seems to be getting worse. Now everything's wrapped in plastic. So even on every scale you can think of, disease, for example, we think we're very clever solving human problems, particularly problems of disease and so forth, but actually we're more sick now as a society than we've ever been, right? Isn't that weird? We've got all this tech and we've got all this ability to resolve these things. We've got much higher understanding, and yet people are getting more and more unhealthy. Even young people now are getting heart disease, for example, even in their 20s in some modern societies. You're like, how? Like, it was unheard of when it was like 80, 100 years ago. And yet all of these things have sort of crept up on us too, right? They've all happened slowly to the point where we sort of become, it's like the frog, the old saying of the frog in the water that's brought to boil. He doesn't know when to get out because he becomes tolerant. And this is what we've become as a society. We've become tolerant of all of these things that are occurring that are actually to our own detriment. And yet it seems like nobody has the will to do much about it. And the question I put to you is this. That all sounds pretty depressing.
Everyone wants to go home.
And I didn't ask you to come here to depress you. But what is the resolution? And I find it really weird because the resolution is so simple. It's just one thing, actually. One thing. It's I need to be more loving. Yeah? Now, a lot of people say this now is gone from looking at all the world's problems. Now we're saying, you're saying what? Me being more loving is the solution. And I'm saying, yeah, actually, that is the only solution to absolutely every problem we face. We need to become more loving. Now, the average person also on earth doesn't think this way. They don't think I need to become more loving. What they think instead is they sort of think I'm already loving. The whole world's a mess, but I'm loving. But how can that be if the world's a mess? If we're all loving, we wouldn't allow unloving things to occur in the world, right? We would want to change all that. So the only real answer to all of our problems is that we personally need to become more loving. And if we did that en masse, like in every country on earth, every population on earth, every nationality, we all decided that we could solve our problems if we became more loving, then all of the world's problems would be solved very, very quickly. Because instead of having a focus on money or on selfishness or on what I want when I want it, on doing all of these other things, fear and worry about other people taking from us and all these other things, instead of focusing on that, because we have a desire to be more loving, a lot of change would occur on the world as a result. But it requires, doesn't it, more than one person deciding to become more loving. And also, we've got to define what we mean by more loving, don't we? Because many of us already believe we're loving, right? And so if I already believe I'm loving, how do I get more loving? If I feel I'm already loving, how do I grow in a state of love from where I am right now? So this becomes then a problem. And like, when I was alive in the first century, I was about 12 years of age, and I was looking at my family, friends that my family had. We were in the stage where we moved from Egypt back to Israel, and we're just making new friends, because my family had been away from Israel for 12 years. But it seemed to me, when we moved back to Nazareth, that nobody understood that if they were more loving, things would go smoothly. Nobody seemed to get that. And this is something that I found quite confusing, because it seems to me that it's a very practical solution and not something that costs us anything, right, either. It's not, you don't need more resources to be more loving, right? You don't need more money to be more loving. You don't need more time to be more loving. You don't need more effort to be more loving in the sense of a physical effort. You can just be more loving, more considerate, more kind, more approachable and understanding of things, and desiring to repair them rather than desiring to cause more damage. But the people around me at the time, I felt, wanted to cause more damage almost. They wanted to get power over others. They wanted, we were under the rule of the Roman Empire, and it was a pretty violent rule, at the time. But it's funny, when you compare the rule we're under now with all the nations on earth, to me, there's this illusion of no violence, but actually there's still a lot of violence in it, right, in the whole process, and not very much love in it, because nobody seems to be focused on how to become more loving. Now, there's another thing that needs to be considered with this. There's my definition of love will determine how I love. You can see that, can't you? So if I define love, and I'm talking now not my intellectual definition of love. I mean my heart, how I feel in my heart about it, right? What my feelings are about love, like. So my definition of love is decided inside of me by my feelings about what is loving and what isn't. So let's call that the definition of love. So obviously, for the world to become a more loving place, individually, our definition of love has to start matching each other. In other words, my definition of love needs to be the same definition that you have, right? So an example of that is, do I feel it's okay to, say, have an abortion, right? An abortion being a removal of life of a child. Is it okay? Like, what is my definition of love? Now, if my definition of love doesn't match yours, then I will potentially do it or encourage it, and you might feel violently opposed to it. So violent that you're willing to attack me even. Well, that is interesting. You don't want the abortion, but you're willing to attack me. That's your faulty definition of love as well, obviously, right? Because if you're willing to attack another person for their beliefs being different, then that's a problem. So my definition of love should be, I'm not willing to attack another person even though our beliefs differ, right? That should be another definition of love. But most of us don't have that. Most of us have this sort of feeling that if someone doesn't agree with me, they're an idiot, right? If someone doesn't get it, they're stupid. And we're willing to go from there right the way through to, if somebody doesn't get it, I can kill them. And this is why wars happen, because that's how far we're willing to go when we disagree, right to the point of murdering somebody. So this is a problem with our definition of love. Like, my definition of love and your definition of love are obviously going to be different when we start out, because we've all been brought up differently. We've all had a different childhood. We've all had different things happen to us. We've all had different experiences that cause our definition of love to be flawed in some way, but where we believe it's not flawed. So,
Yeah, so we can see that as we go through our everyday life. There's a lot of things that we think are reasonable and good, and other things we think are not good, or people who we think, oh, they're very out of line, or people we think they're very wonderful. And all of those feelings we're having can show us something about our definition of love, because really we're analysing everything around us, of whether that's loving or unloving, good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable. And as Jesus said, it is a very definite thing that exists individually inside every one of us in this room. We all have a slightly different idea of what it is to love and what it is to not be loving, and none of them are necessarily correct.
Yeah. Or none of them will solve the world's problems, is another way of putting it.
Yes, because many problems would be solved, wouldn't they?
If we could agree on what love is.
Yeah.
Then many problems would be solved. But if I don't agree with Mary about what love is, and this is something we even find in relationships.
Very much.
Most of the time, the two parties in a relationship don't even agree, let alone agreeing with another third party, someone outside of a relationship, right? And so you end up in this sort of problem, don't you? Like, who's going to define what love is? And what, you could say, ideal of love are we going to be searching for? What ideal of love are we going to grasp and work towards? Because if it's our own, it's flawed. If it's our own. And you can see it's flawed because we have the results of a flawed view of love already on earth. The results we have are all to do with the lack of love being expressed in different ways on earth. But obviously the average person does not think they're being unloving when they do a thing, right? The average person doesn't think about that. They, when they go to, do anything, even minor things. So when the person comes up with a nice food and they decide to package it in a plastic bag, they don't think they're being unloving, right? They don't think about the ramifications. But they need to, because it does have, like if the food takes off, if the packaging, people will be buying it left, right and centre, then, obviously there's going to be results from that. And the average, country doesn't think about things like taxation. Like, why do we need it? The average person doesn't think, do we need it? The average person just accepts that the only way for a government to function is for government to take money from the people that earned the money in order for the government to function. But there's a lot of other a lot easier and more simple ways of running a government than that, right? In order to provide it for the funds that it needs to build infrastructure. There's a lot simpler ways, very practical, simple ways. But because of a lack of love, nobody wants to do those things, right? Now, oftentimes we have discussions at home with small groups of people and they say, well, how would you run the country? And I know how I would run it, like easy. It's easy. But the more loving you become, the easier it is to find a loving solution to every problem, right? It is so easy. We won't discuss it now because that would be a whole day in itself, but it's quite easy.
It is,
Yeah.
but often because people have different definitions of love, if they, for example, might have to feel some discomfort in the definition, they say, well, that's not loving, because my definition of love is that I'm comfortable all of the time.
I need to be comfortable
Yeah.
all the time, or I need to have a bank balance all the time. That's what makes me comfortable, right? That kind of thing. I need to know that the country cares for me, right? I need to know that I'm not alone, caring for myself, those kind of things. And these are all definitions of love we have that we hold on to. And over the course of our lifetime, the average person doesn't let them go. They remain the entire person's life. They pass with that definition
They instill
into the
them
spirit world.
into their children.
Yep.
And yeah.
Train the next generation to have them as well, right? So you can see our definition of love, for us to become more loving, we have to question what is our definition of love and what does it mean to become more loving. We need to consider these things. And we also need to consider what is the easiest way to become more loving, right? Now, I don't know about you, but, before, in this life, I had this period of time in this life where I didn't remember who I was. And so I was in a state where I couldn't remember things about God or anything to do with that. So what I did was I sort of relied on myself and my own ideas in terms of how to become more loving, right? But the problem is my ideas differed, of course, even from all of my family members' ideas. Like even my brother and my sister have a different idea, and my father and my mother have a different idea of what is loving. So it becomes more and more difficult for me because everybody, even my closest companions, friends, family, have a completely different view oftentimes of what is love and what isn't. So we need to be able to get to the stage where, firstly, I have a need, or you could say it in a more loving manner, desire. I could say it, I must become more loving, couldn't I? But for me to say I must, can you see, it's sort of like telling me, you got to do it, man, and you get pretty forceful with yourself in that place, can you see? And often you become even more unloving to yourself when you feel you must do something. Have you noticed that? So if you feel like you must go and visit your mum because she's sick or whatever, you force yourself to do it even though you don't want to, right? So, I'm not saying that you don't want to all the time. I'm just saying on the day that you feel you have to, you often don't have a desire, right? Can you see a desire is required to become a more loving person? An internal feeling inside of myself that motivates me to decide that I want to. Can you see that? That I want to be a more loving person. Can you see without that desire, you are not going to change. You're not going to become a more loving person. Collectively and individually, this is what needs to happen on earth. We need to collectively and individually get to the stage where we all desire to be more loving people. If we're all in that state, then you can see that a lot of the things on earth wouldn't occur. So, an example of that. You know how the environment is just getting destroyed, worse and worse every year. Everywhere we go, you see it. If I was more loving, I wouldn't want to do that. If I was more loving, I'd probably want to repair that. If I was more loving, I'd probably want to put some effort into repairing that. If I was more loving, I'd probably want to come up with methods of putting effort into repairing that. I would think about it. I would desire it. I would have a passion for it. I would want to change something with regard to my life to make that happen, if I had the desire. But if I feel I need to, that feels pretty like workman-like, doesn't it? And how do most of us feel about work? If you can avoid it, most of us do, right? If you can put it off, most of us do, right? And it's rare to find a person actually who sees some work to be done and who actually wants to do it. Like frequently, we see it needs to be done, we know it has to be done. I don't really want to do it, but I have to do it, right? That's really the feeling in most people. And for many of us, we don't realise it, but we have the same feeling about being more loving. We sort of feel like, I would desire to be more loving, but we think, do I have to? Like, what does that mean? What is that like, you know? We have this sort of lack of motivation, isn't it? A lack of motivation. And partly it's because of our definition of love that we have that lack of motivation, but partly it's because we're feeling hopeless as well. Many of us look at the world and we go, but if I'm more loving, my next door neighbour's not going to be. So what's he going to do when I become more loving? I'll want to give him my things and he won't want to give me his. And I'll end up with nothing, right? So many of us think this way. Many of us are thinking, but for anything to change, we all need to change at the same time, is what we all think. Because if I change first, everyone will take advantage of me.
Or they'll think I'm silly or stupid or foolish, that I'm ruining things, that I'm not loving them because they don't have my definition of love and now they think I've been a meanie. Or we make all kinds of excuses for not actually being the first person to become more loving.
Yeah. So can you see a part of this equation is I desire to be more loving, but I also need to desire to be the first one who does it. Do you see? Because if somebody needs to decide.
Yep. And equal with that feeling, isn't it, is even if nobody else is making this decision, I still desire to do it.
Yeah. Yep. At least I no longer will participate in making everything more unloving if I do that, right? Can you see also you'd have some level of pride in yourself doing that? Can you see that too? That you would understand that love becomes the main motivator for every action you take, right? And if you can get to that point where love becomes the motivator for your decisions and actions, can you see you would also be able to feel, I feel quite good about that's what I'm doing, right? So you'll actually feel better about yourself as well in the process.
Not something our definition of love currently tells us, though, is it? Yeah.
So let's just replace. Let's look at that. Let's get rid of that need. Replace it with the proper word, desire. All right. So now we're sort of changing the equation a bit, aren't we, with this problem, because we're saying it's one thing to say to myself, I have to do it. It's quite another thing to say to myself, I can desire to do it. I can choose to do it. I can use my will to do it, right? That is something we're going to have to address, because if you need to do it and you don't have a desire, it's like you'll be in an internal battle with yourself. On one hand, you think you need to do it. On the other hand, you feel like, I don't really want to do it. So you're going to be in internal battle with your own apathy. Makes sense? Your own apathy saying, I don't want to, I don't really, it's not comfortable, it's hard, it's difficult, I don't know how to do it, I don't know how to learn how to do it, I don't know what to do. your apathy says all of that, and so on the other hand you go, but I have to, and there's all this other pressure coming from your own emotional state saying, I don't know if I really want to, right? So that needs to change, and the only way that's going to change is for me to develop a desire, and then the question becomes, well, how do I when I don't have one? It's like asking us to develop something that doesn't exist inside of us is pretty difficult, isn't it, at times? To do something that you don't know how and also have no inclination to do is difficult. So desire needs to change. My definition of love needs to change, because my definition of love, being different to Mary's or yours, means that we're in conflict with each other about what love is. And if I'm in conflict with you about what love is, then naturally there are going to be conflicts that result from that. Now, you see this happening with relationships, where there's conflicts in a relationship often as a result of that, right? You see these conflicts occurring all the time in a relationship, but we then don't see, what's happening in my relationship is what's happening between me and the rest of the world as well. I'm in a conflict with the rest of the world as well, with regard to many of my definitions being different to other people's definitions. So you can see somehow that needs to also change. I need to desire to change my definition of love somehow, and also need some practical way to do it. Like, it's no good just talking about this as a theory and going, it sounds all good, but how realistic is it, right? Really? We need to have a realistic way of being able to become more loving, and also being able to desire to change our definition of love so that we can become more loving.
And we're not just changing that definition to just any old other definition, are we? We want to change it to the true definition of love. The one that if we all found the truth about love, we'd all share.
And we'd all get along. And we'd all enjoy each other's company rather than being in conflict. Right? You see what's happening there today, a lot of times conflicts are almost like ignored. It's like, you're lovely, I'm lovely, and everybody's in this sort of fake non-conflict. But the world's still in conflict, so that tells you it's all fake, right? Because if it was real, there would actually be no conflict. So quite often we're prepared also to fake togetherness, fake agreement, as long as it doesn't matter too much to us. If it matters too much, then we don't generally do that. But if it doesn't seem to matter that I compromise, and Mary has a view of love, and I go, does that really worry me? No, it doesn't care about that. So one of that might be, Mary decides that it's okay for her to treat people badly. And I go, well, as long as it's not me, that's fine. Right? So now I'm in agreement with it, that she's okay to treat people badly, right? Now we're not in conflict. Right? So we seemingly get along, but of course everybody Mary's interacting with is getting attacked one way or the other. That's not good. And if I actually had a good definition of love myself, I wouldn't say, I can't agree with you doing that. But then there might be conflict between Mary and me. Right? So rather than do that, I go, I'd rather just ignore that, just let that go. So when you go to a psychologist and get some advice about a relationship, what do they tell you to do? Where can you compromise? Well, you can see that's just your opinion. What about respecting her opinion? Right? These are kind of the things that are said, which are actually encouraging us to have a completely different version of love while we're trying to live together. Now, naturally, most of the time it doesn't work. That's why there's 2/3 of marriages end up in divorce. And if you added up all the separations that occur without people being in marriage, it would be much more than that, wouldn't it? It'd be like 95% of relationships end up breaking up, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's only the ones who got married and have a piece of paper said, but we've got to honour the piece of paper, that's why we're staying together. Often that's the only reason why they do. It's all to do with the fact that we don't have the same view of love. Right? These conflicts that occur. We measure everything internally by our own pain versus our own pleasure. And when we're in what we feel is pain or justified pain, we often then enter a conflict with another because we don't understand that it requires for all of us to eventually get along on Earth, and there's 8 billion of us that need to learn how to get along. So most people look at that and they go, I can't even get along with my partner most of the time. How am I going to get along with 8 billion people? But it is possible. It is possible. But the question becomes how. How it's possible. All right. So the question is, how do I change my definition of love? And how do I desire to be more loving? And how do I actually become more loving? All right? You can see I can't become more loving if I don't desire to.
So I need to see there's a problem, don't I?
So I need to see there's a problem with my desire, right? But I also can't become more loving if I don't know what love is. So I need to understand what love really is. And then how do I actually physically do it? Like, how do I actually feel, change my feelings enough inside of me, change those feelings so that I feel love for people, that I actually feel it like a warmth in my heart for people. Every person, even the person that might even attack me or belittle me or make my life uncomfortable in some way or another. How do I do that? How do I become loving to the point where I'm no longer focused on my own comfort and my own serenity, and I'm focused instead on just my life needs to be dedicated towards becoming a more loving person? There's got to be a practical way to do it, right? So these were the things I pondered when I was 12 in the first century. And it was interesting pondering that subject because it sort of got to the point where I'm going, well, I'm looking at my mum and my dad and they don't know the answer to that. I'm looking at my brothers and sisters. By that stage, I had 4 brothers and 3 sisters, and they knew nothing about it. They were younger than I was, so of course, they didn't know anything about it. I looked at, I got educated by rabbis in the first century, and none of them knew the answer to the problem either. Then my father, he was aspiring to be a member of the governing body in the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and he was a Pharisee, my father. He didn't know how to do it, right? And then I looked at the Romans who conquered our country, and they didn't know how to do it either. Everything was done by force and violence. I looked at other religious faiths, quite frequently people would pass through our town, because they're on the way to somewhere else, and they might be billeted or stay overnight, and you'd talk to them, but none of them knew how to do it either, right? And so it caused me to feel, well, there's got to be some solution to this problem of how, do I desire to be more loving, and how do I become more loving? There's got to be some way of resolving that, right? And in my upbringing then in the first century, I was educated to believe there was a God. And I wasn't always certain that there was one. You go through these sort of places, don't you, where when you're young, when you're little, you don't think about some things very much until you start thinking about them, obviously. And it was the same for me. I didn't think about some things very much until I was, intellectually developed enough to have the capacity to reason with myself. And that was by the time I was 5 or 6, and I started reasoning with myself and feeling there must be a God, because everything that was natural was so well designed. Everything that humans did wasn't well designed. In fact, in some cases it was quite well designed, but to kill other people, but not well designed in a sense of like a loving design, So I had to contemplate, well, if there's a God, it would make logical sense to me that God knows what love is. God knows the true definition of love. It would also make sense to me that, being my creator, that God was fundamentally my parent. And as a parent, I could look at my mum and dad, and they had some love for us, as children. My mum and dad both. They, in different ways, they expressed it, sometimes very injured ways. They expressed their so-called love, but they did have concern or compassion and kindness for us many times as children. They cared for us, they fed us, they made sure that we could sleep somewhere. They had enough kindness and compassion to do those things, as well as my dad had enough compassion for me to educate me, for example. Desired my education, so I was sent to school. Basically, it was a religious school, but of course he got a bit difficult with it at times. So by the time I was 7, I was sent to a soldier training school, which wasn't that good. So that was difficult. But he thought he was doing it out of love for me, right? Even though it was his flawed definition of love. And I thought, there's my dad's flawed definition of love again. Not helping me, like it was violent, excessively violent, to the point where they would have killed me probably. And it was difficult 2 years of my life. And I was only 7 to 9. Difficult life. And you have these experiences and you go, like, who would even contemplate sending their son, their firstborn son in the first century? Firstborn son was like pretty important, right? Nowadays, maybe not so important, but back then, pretty important. And he sent his firstborn son to a violent school to be taught how to become violent, right? Who in their right mind would do that? Well, there's a lot of people today who do that, ironically. So, I knew he thought he was being loving to me, but it wasn't loving, and it was very harmful, very dangerous, and to the point where my life was threatened in the end, and they had to take me out because the teachers said, look, we'd have to kill him to change his mind. So either we're going to kill him or you're going to have your firstborn son back. My dad decided to have me back. But, that is what happened because my father's definition of love was way out of harmony with what felt loving to me at the time. And so from those experiences, by the time I was 12, I was reasoning, well, God can't be like that, but also I could see loving things my mum and dad were doing. God would be more like that. So I started to feel, and by this stage it was a well-established feeling, that God was the most loving being if somehow there was some way to connect, some way to have this relationship needed to be established. And it needed to be established for many reasons, but one of the main reasons was that I needed to be more loving. I needed to have God's definition of what love is. At that stage I didn't have a very firm opinion of what love was, but I could feel there were certain things that certainly weren't love. Like my father sending me to that school wasn't loving. Right? I could feel that, but I didn't have a firmly grasped opinion at this point of what love really was. And I needed to learn from somebody, but nobody could teach me, is the way I was thinking. But obviously God could, so I had to find some way to learn from God. Right? Learn from God. I had a desire to be more loving first, and then I had to learn from God what the definition of love was. Right? And then I thought, well, maybe God's made it so simple and everybody's just missing it, right? And it is, what blows me away is it is so simple. So simple. Right? And what I see today is most people on earth are missing it. Right? There's no consideration of how simple it is. The simple thing is, let God tell you what love is. And how does God do that? So that's what I contemplated. How do I let God tell me what love is? Now, love is a feeling, right? All of you know that it's a feeling. It's not a thought. Do you agree with that? Or how many of you think love is a thought? Because obviously if it's a thought, then it's a very intellectual thing, isn't it? Not very motivational. But if it's a feeling, it's something that you feel. Like when you feel affection for another, can you not feel it? Like you do, don't you? It's like, I feel really drawn to that person or whatever, for whatever reason. And it affects you emotionally. So I knew love was a feeling, so there had to be a way that I could receive God's feelings. And I had to do it not just because I wanted to be loved by somebody, because I didn't feel very loved myself in my life. I had to do it for other reasons too. Like I had to do it because I needed to be a more loving person. I needed to understand what love was. I needed to be able to get to the stage where I did not replicate the behaviour of my father and mother with my own children if I had any. That I didn't do that. That I didn't replicate. My mum and dad had arguments a lot, right? They were in disharmony a lot, not drawn out, violent fights, which I suppose you could say most people on earth don't really have with their partner. Obviously that's a pretty bad relationship. But they have a lot of disagreements where one of them or both of them would sort of walk away, where they just could not get on and could not agree with each other. And I didn't want that with my partner. I knew that I would have one at some point, a partner, and I didn't want that either. So for my own sake and for hers, I needed to grasp what love was. Needed to get a new definition of love. So I decided, which you all know now, right? Because we've talked about it before, but I decided that the answer was God. The answer to becoming a more loving person for me was God. And that's why I created, at the time, a definition of prayer. Because I felt that if God's love could enter me, then I would automatically have inside of me a definition of love that would be true, and I would automatically be able to act upon it in every situation as God would act. I'm not saying that you'd have the same power as God, but you would act in a loving manner as God would decide to act in that loving manner if God would ever become human, which of course God can't. Right? Now, what I see happening today in most religious thoughts is quite interesting, because most religious thoughts have a number of different ways that they portray learning about God and love. An example, if you look at it, is if you look at like the Christian faith, for example. So if a person is a Christian, they basically believe that fundamentally you need to accept some basic tenets that are presented to you in the Bible, and you must accept them in your heart as truth. And then you must also accept that Jesus died for your sins, and that's how you have a relationship with God. Right? Now, of course, all of that happened after my time, because it was all based on my life. It all happened after my time. But in the first century, there were religious tenets like that. I grew up in the Jewish faith, and the Jewish faith basically had the idea the way you keep your relationship with God was by sacrifice. So you sacrifice something, either your own time and effort and energy, or an animal, or even sometimes they'd sacrifice their own children by saying, well, now you've got that job to do the rest of your life, making that decision for the child, and then the child has to do that the rest of their life kind of thing, which many people do today as well. But there was this sort of idea that sacrifice was the way to have a relationship with God, you know. Then you look at things like New Age teachings. So if you look at New Age teachings, they believe, generally, that God's already in you. And all you've got to do is activate the God force within you. Does that make sense? Many of you were brought up with this or had heard this before you'd listened to Divine Truth, right? The idea that God's already there. All you've got to do is connect to that goodness, that God inside of you, and then you're already a part of God, you just don't know it, and once you do know it, then you'll be better, is sort of the general idea. Of course, that's not true either, by the way. When we are created beings, there is no part of God inside of us. None at all. We are a creating being of God, so you could say we are a result of God's thoughts, right? You could say we're a result of God's desires, but God himself does not exist inside of you, right? God is an entity, a separate entity to you. And in fact, God is pure and holy and without sin, without disharmony from love. So for God to be inside of you, the only way that can happen is for you to attain that condition yourself, be without sin. So, the whole idea that, all you have to do is just activate the God force within inside of you. While it sounds all pretty, it is not. It doesn't work. And many of you have had that experience where you've tried and it didn't work. And many of you have had the experience of all the people who claim it works and they treat you badly. So that doesn't work, right? So you know that, these New Age views. Then you have big religions, right? The Muslim faith, the Hindu faith, and so forth, right? The Buddhist faith. Is it double D?
Yeah.
And every faith has its own concept of what God is. Buddhist faith, I'm God. Hindu faith, there's many gods. Muslim faith, there's one God. And every one of them have a view of what God's character is. Muslim faith, God's angry with you unless you're of the Muslim faith. Christian faith is the same, by the way. God's angry with you unless you're of the Christian faith. And God's so angry with you in the Christian faith and the Muslim faith that you will be destroyed if you don't come to agree with God. Right? That's what both of those faiths believe. They're very similar to each other, actually. The Hindu faith, it doesn't matter what you believe. You can have lots of different beliefs, but there is a belief there is an afterlife, right? But not a single God. There's all these gods. And, if you want one thing, you ask one God, and if you want another thing, you ask another God, and so forth, right? The Buddhist faith is that we are obtaining to be God ourselves. We are becoming in the state of purity ourselves. So it's very similar. You can see the similarities between the Buddhist faith and the New Age faith. Now, all of these things, there were types of that were around when I was in the first century too, just different faiths. Many of them arrived after, the Muslim faith, the Christian faith arrived after I was on earth in the first century. But others were there, like the Hindu and Buddhist ideas and teachings were all present because of all different things before. The Grecian philosophies, the Roman philosophies, they were all there. They all had an idea of what God was. And I just thought, isn't that weird too? Because if I'm God's child, all I need to do is ask God what God is. So none of these people can be asking God what God is in order to have different views of what God is. It's like love. In order for us to have all different views of what love is, we all must have a different definition of love inside of us. So if I've got a different definition of God than you have, then I must have just a concept of God that isn't God herself, but rather just a concept that I've dreamed up. And you've got yours that you dreamed up or were taught. So I could see there was the problem of love was also the problem about God. Could you see? That they're related problems. The more we divorce ourselves from listening to the actual creator of us, the further we divorce ourselves from the potential of understanding what love is. And that's a fundamental truth that we need to come to terms with. So now I'm giving a very brief summary here of the kind of thinking that I had, and still have, by the way. So I came to understand that in order for things to change for me, I had to have some kind of connection with God where I could ask for something and potentially receive it. That's how it had to be. And that would be the answer to me becoming a more loving person, if I so desired. Right? So what I notice is, Mary and I have been teaching divine truth, probably me longer than Mary, but for teaching divine truth in this life, I worked it out, it's 21 years now. In terms of a public setting, 21 years. And very few people that we meet have a desire to be more loving. And if you're honest with yourselves, can you see many of you haven't put a priority on it, right? Can you see that? Like, you haven't put a priority on being a more loving person. It's difficult to put a priority on it when you don't even know what that means, right? But also, we haven't put a priority on our relationship with God to become a more loving person, right? And that's the reason why we gave you the gift we gave you this morning. The 4 books. In those 4 books contains the philosophy, you could say, or the teaching, the accurate teaching of how to receive love from God and change your own definition of love by doing that. That is the simplest and easiest way for you to become a more loving person. Of course, it has some precursors, doesn't it? Prerequisites. I've got to believe there is a God in order to do it. That's one prerequisite.
Are you open to the possibility?
Open to the possibility,
you don't
at
have
least.
to have a firm faith.
Yeah. Open to the possibility of being proven wrong if I believe there isn't a God, for example. I need to be open to that possibility. I also need to be open to the possibility that I somehow have to open up to it. Because if I'm not receiving it by default, just because I exist, why? Why aren't I receiving that love just because I'm a child of God? There's got to be some reason that God has for only providing love to a person who asks, right? So if I'm not automatically receiving it, the question would be why? What's happening? And you can see it requires quite a lot of self-reflection in terms of determining these things. And these kind of things need to be discussed. And so when we gave these messages to Padgett in 1914, we started doing that. We were in the spirit world and we started channeling to James Padgett. We thought we've got to share with the world somehow of what they need to do and what beliefs and truths they need to imbibe in order to actually receive love from God so that the world can become more loving, right? And so that's why we entered this arrangement with James Padgett to share with him the truths that we'd discovered over those 2,000-year period, right? And so those messages become a very important part of your potential future if you want to become more loving. How many of you have read them completely? So maybe 5 in our audience of maybe 80.
80, I think.
or 90. What does that tell me, do you think? Can you see? It sort of tells me that you don't yet understand the importance of God's love in your life. Can you see that? That you don't yet see its the practicalities of it. And so that's why we've given you the messages. So you have an opportunity to read them in total. And my suggestion is to reread them. I think in this life I've read them at least 30 times, and every single time I feel more. Because as you grow, you feel more, right? And so every single time I feel more. And so things that you thought you got before, often you didn't get to the depth that you now understand. So the first thing we'd like to do is, when you go from this group, is to start reading them. Now, the way they've been organised is that they are in subject matter where the most important subjects are first. So the reason why we've provided these particular messages to you are not ones that have been done in date order or numeric
date order. Yeah.
Date order, is because we feel the subjects are what are important to understand and grasp first. So we'd like to firstly encourage you to do that, to make a goal of starting it. Now, many of you would have probably started it in the past and felt quite bored within the first message, maybe. And there's reasons for that. And part of the reason is this problem that we talked about before, which is desire. We've got to address the problem of desire. What causes you to desire something? Do you want to tell me what you think? Yep, if we go across here with the mic.
And maybe down to Tim in the front.
And maybe down to Tim at the front here.
Yeah, just come through the
Through
middle.
the centre is fine.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what causes you to want to desire something?
It's usually pleasure.
Pleasure, okay. So feeling that you're going to get some pleasure.
Yeah.
Because you haven't got it yet, right? And you feel like you desire a new thing because you think it's going to bring you the thing you want. So pleasure. Yeah.
Seeking pleasure, we could say.
Yep. Okay.
Tim?
You need to have a reason or a motivation to do it.
So we want a motive.
And a purpose, otherwise.
Yeah, purpose.
Yep. Okay. Yep. We just come across here. Yep.
And
then
if we
down
to Nellie.
And then to Nellie. Yep.
Oh, hi, can I talk now?
Yep.
Hungry for knowledge.
Sorry? Yeah.
Hungry for knowledge.
Hungry? Yeah.
Hungry. That's why I desire to know, because I'm hungry. There's something is missing. I'm hungry about it. I want to know, so
Correct.
I'm looking for it.
So
That's
hungry is a good word, isn't it, in a way? You could say hungry, or can we say you long for it? Yeah, okay. So longing. Yep. Else?
Like you've seen other people doing it and like you're like, oh yeah, I really like that.
Okay, so you see the
Inspiration.
benefits that other people are having from the same thing. So you could say there has to be benefits, doesn't there? That you sort of yourself, you understand. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then?
Faith that I can do it.
Okay, faith is sort of linked to some of these things too, isn't it? It's sort of like, if I don't see any benefit, am I going to have much faith? Probably not. You know, if I don't feel hungry for something, am I going to do it? Probably not, right? So you can see there's the whole concept of faith is really driven by, I need to get to the stage, or, you know, if I want something, I need to understand that it's good for me. Like, and I need to feel that it's going to be good for me, right?
And that it's possible.
And it's possible, not completely impossible. Like, so many times you'd like to think something would be possible, like winning the lottery or something, right? And when you start realising that it's like 1 in 20 million chance, you go, well, that's I've got more chance of being struck by lightning than winning the lottery. So many of us go, well, I'm not going to go in it then, because there's no, that's a very, very low, slim chance. For faith to work, there needs to be a belief, doesn't there, that it's a very high likelihood of something happening, rather than a minuscule likelihood of it happening. Right? So that's important. Yep. Where next, babe?
We haven't gone. Let's go Philippa, and then who had their hand up over here? Yep, Ellis. Yeah.
Philippa?
Passion.
Sorry?
Passion.
Passion. What would you define as passion, Philippa?
So excitement.
Okay, yeah, good. So excited.
And energized.
Yeah, these are really all linked to future feelings. Like, can you see that? It's like, it's going to be good for my future. Can you see? It's not like, I've got a certain thing right now, but this is going to be better. And so this is what causes us to feel excited, isn't it? It's going to be better if we do these things. Yep.
I want to know the truth. I'm curious. I want to know how things work.
Okay, yeah. Curious.
That's a lot of what drives children's learning, isn't it? Oh,
yeah.
What's that? I'm going to.
They see you doing something. What are you doing that for?
Yeah.
And it's not critical, is it? When you see a child be curious, it's not. There's no criticism in it. There's just like, I want to know what's going on. Why wouldn't I want to know?
I want to try.
I want to try it. There's that kind of thinking. Yeah. Where we next, Ben?
If we go to Michael and then back to Rebecca after that,
and then
and
down
up
along
to
the front,
Perry.
Yep. So if we come to Perry and then back.
Yeah, we'll go to Perry first and then we'll come across here.
Go on.
Oh no, sorry.
Where are we
Flip
up
that.
to here?
Michael here.
Michael.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
Could you say that it's almost like a gut feeling that you're not quite sure that you understand?
Yeah,
or
it's interesting, isn't it? It's sort of like there's an emotional feeling that something might be better, isn't it? Like, so you could say what you call a gut feeling, is really like it's a really interesting sort of idea, isn't it? Because it's like a wonderment and a potentiality all mixed together.
And
isn't
so
it?
I'm just like, it feels like I should go in that direction.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's an inclination. It also could be influenced, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
By all sorts of things,
Inspired.
including external things, but also internal.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Where are we next?
Perry.
Perry.
And then back to Rebecca.
When your current state is in pain, or there's like dissatisfaction or boredom with your life.
Okay, so you could say a lot of these things are positive, you could say. Let's draw the line there. And then there's all sorts of negative motivators, isn't there? Like pain. I'm in pain, I need to change something, that kind of thing. These, of course, are not as positive motivators, are they?
The more selfish,
But they can help.
Yeah.
Because they sort of it makes you realise, wow, do I want to keep getting the same thing that I'm getting right now for the rest of my existence? No. So I want to change. I've got to change something, to do that. So pain certainly has an effect.
It's sort of like I want to stop the bad thing from happening rather than I want to go for the good thing. Yeah. It's like the bad thing keeps happening. I must have to do something different, or I want to do something different.
Or sometimes your life just feels boring, and you're like,
okay, yeah. So part of pain is boredom.
With your life,
Yeah, dissatisfied.
Boredom is a really interesting kind of quote-unquote emotion, because often it's a cover for, we say, I'm bored, but it's covering over a whole heap of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So you can see from this lesson, we could keep going, right? But you can see there's sort of, you could say, positive motivators, couldn't you? To actually develop a desire inside of you to change something. And then there's what you would classify as negative motivators, in the sense that they are painful, but they still can create a positive desire to change something. Mm-hmm. Yep. And how you measure both things is going to have an influence. So an example of what I mean by that is, if I feel that I'm just going to ignore and deny any pain I'm in at all, then of course that takes away all of these things as motivators. Can you see that? If I just ignore the problems I have and make them go away. So we're good at this now, like on Earth, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
of just going, oh yeah, I can't see that, I can't see that, I can't see that. We're good at doing that in our own life, where we feel, I can't see that, I can't see that, I don't want to see that, right, really. And we're good at denial, right? But the trouble with denial is it takes away all of the painful things that are occurring that cause me to develop a motivation to change. So now, all that's left are my pleasurable ones that are going to cause a motivation to change. You follow? So I'm suggesting, in that suggestion, that you allow a knowledge of your pain and suffering to also help you to make changes. Not just develop positive desires, but also allow a state where you're no longer in denial. You see, and when it comes to world problems, we are particularly prone to denial. Have you noticed that? Like, how many times do you think during the course of a day, oh, there's no birds in my countryside? Or, you know, what would there have been birds of like 100 years ago compared to now? Or there's hardly any trees in my countryside anymore, you know? Or now all the trees are being replaced by electrical generation windmills, you know? And how do you feel about that? You know, when we're in a state of denial, we don't let ourselves have feelings about those things. We just go, oh, I can't change that, so what's the point? So the problem with this state of being in denial of it, sorry, Ben.
That's right.
And the problem with being in denial of the pain and suffering is that we have a tendency then to ignore all the unloving things and try to focus our attention on just what we believe are the loving things. But that's a state of ignorance and also a state of self-delusion.
And it masks a lot of arrogance as well. I find that unless you're willing to acknowledge your pain and suffering, then you're content to think you've got it right, that what you're doing is righteous. As soon as you start to tune into your pain and suffering, over time, if you're honest with yourself, you begin to question, well, something's wrong. Could be me.
So an example of that is this. How many of you live alone? When I say don't live with a partner, a sexual relationship, right?
Wow, that's nearly 90.
How many of you feel happy about it? Right. A couple. Yeah?
5.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, can you see, all of you who are unhappy about it must be ignoring it. Can you see that? Must be ignoring it as a pain. Because if you weren't ignoring it, you'd want to do something about it. And to be honest, the way to attract a loving partner is for you to become more loving. Right? That's how you attract a loving partner, right? But you can see even that problem, you haven't thought about it like that, right? You haven't thought about it, if I was just more loving, would I remain alone even anymore?
No, we think usually in that state it's because everyone else is unloving that I'm alone.
Yeah, I just haven't found the right person yet. Right? But if I was more loving and I even believed in soulmates, I would attract my soulmate most probably. But if I'm unloving, can you see your soulmate's probably not going to be that hot about you? Can you see that? It's logical, isn't it? Why would they be attracted into your life if you're not a very loving person? Now, the problem is we often think we're loving when we're not. So obviously, if I haven't attracted the person, then I obviously am more unloving than I believe myself to be. Right? And that needs to be addressed. So can you see how we have a tendency to just ignore the painful problems and just live with them? We just sort of numb ourselves out to them. Right? And that's a big problem. So it's important to acknowledge the pain in order to make change. It is an important thing we need to address. All right, so here we are. These are the things that cause us to have a desire, and there's many others obviously. And this can also help us have a desire if we are not in denial to it. So as long as we're not in denial to our pain and suffering, that can cause us to make changes in our life. And also, as long as we believe there's some positive benefit to it, that will cause changes in my life too, right? So this is you could say this is the desire equation, couldn't you? It's a mathematical fact, really, that you are not going to have a desire unless these conditions exist about the subject and these conditions are acknowledged about the subject. You're not going to develop a desire otherwise, right? To have a desire to receive God's love means that I need to see there's a pleasure in it. I need to see that there's purpose in it, and I need to become hungry about it. I need to see there's benefits. I need to have a passion and excitement about it, and curious about it even. Just experimentally curious about it. These things need to exist before I will do anything. And on the other hand, we need to start looking at, if I don't have a relationship with God, what are the penalties, you could say, of not having that relationship? What is the pain and suffering that is caused by not having that relationship? You follow? And unless I'm prepared in my own being, in my feelings, to address this equation, this sort of mathematical fact, can you see, it's very unlikely that I will desire God's love. And the problem is, if I don't desire it, then I'm not going to become any more loving than the average person is. And so many people who have been listening to Divine Truth for many years are no more loving than the average person is. And this is a fact we need to acknowledge. And the reason why is because the personal motivation or desire to become a more loving person has yet to exist. Now, in the Padgett Messages, you'll find there's a prayer. Mary handed out some prayer cards for you, and in that prayer, it addresses a number of these problems. And most people who read the prayer sort of look at it as more a theoretical, sort of rote thing to say without examining the contents of it to see what kind of problems are identified by the actual prayer itself that was given to James Padgett.
Yeah, you can read that prayer as, it's very pretty language, or it says a lot of lovely things. But actually every word in that prayer is designed to help you with a certain issue around desire and love. And if you sit with it and feel about where each word hits you, if you like, it can often be very enlightening about where you're at in terms of desire and love and God's authority.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's our time?
Yeah, it feels like break time, doesn't it? But we're still...
We said we would break at 1 for all those people who have arranged lunch here. So we've got 20 minutes now to just sort of polish off this idea a bit. Because after the break, what I would like to do is go into a bit of detail with you with the prayer. And during this trip around the world, we're going to go into the same detail with every group. Now, when I say the same detail, obviously in 1.5 days, because we're on Sunday, this coming Sunday, we want to do some mediumship with Helping Spirits on Sunday, and we want to discuss with you other things on Sunday as well, not just this subject. So we've got 1.5 days now with you to talk about the prayer, what it involves, and what the pitfalls are that most of us fall into with regard to the real reason why we haven't grown in love very much by receiving God's love. That makes sense?
Because really we're saying, I don't know if you've actually said it directly yet, but the way to become more loving is to receive God's love, and the only way to receive God's love is through prayer.
Yeah. And the only way to receive God's love is the way God defined it could be received. So if you want to give love to another person, it's only going to be given based on what you want to give, isn't it? Right? And the same applies, of course, to God. Like, it's only going to be given in terms of what God wants to give. And the key is to learn what God wants to give. And then you understand how to receive God's love. Once you can receive God's love, then you will become more loving. That's an automatic process of becoming more loving. It's not going to be hard to become more loving, but it does require some desire on your part. And the reason why many of us have not become more loving is because the desire has not been present. Make sense? Yep. Question?
I'm sorry, it might be a silly question, but the problem is how to have the desire. I have a lot of desire, but when it comes to receive God's love or to pray to God, the desire is sometimes not there, so I just follow how I feel. I don't.
Yeah. Well, this is what we need to address, isn't it? We need to work out, okay, these are the things that grow desire, and this also can grow desire. So all of these things can grow desire. So we have to ask ourselves the question, well, what of those things am I not doing if my desire isn't changing? Don't I? I need to be honest with myself about that. So there's going to need to be a personal examination of our own level of honesty about what we think we want versus what we really want. Right? So most of the time, many of us have got caught up in this tricky situation, you could say, in that we think that our thoughts are our feelings. Yeah? And it's really encouraged on earth today to believe that your thoughts are your feelings. Mm-hmm. You know, quite often somebody says, you know, you're in the supermarket and somebody says, excuse me. Really what they feel is get out of my way. But they express it as a thought called excuse me. Does that make sense? Right? So their feelings are very different to their thoughts. And there's other times when they say thank you. And really what they're saying is you should have given me that in the first place. Right? Their feelings are very different to their thoughts. And many of us have become so used to that we start believing that our thoughts are our real feelings. Right? So that's an issue too. We need to address what is real inside of us versus what I would like to believe is real inside of me. I need to separate the two from each other. I need to know what is actually true about my own feelings versus what I would like to believe is true about my own feelings. Right? And if I can do that, then I can be a lot more honest with myself. And the prayer actually promotes honesty, and this is one of the things we'll be discussing in the discussion. Now, we might not get to discuss it with you, because this is going to be a 4-month-long discussion with all sorts of people over the coming 4 months. And one of the reasons why we wanted to film it and record it is because we wanted to sort of, at the end, we know that all of you would probably be interested in the other discussions that we had with other people about the same subject, right? So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do that. Perry? Thanks, Cindy.
Just keep your hand up, Perry, so yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if you'll go into this more, but something that I come across is sustaining that desire. For, like, when I watch yourselves, it's a constant thing in your lives on a daily basis where I might get a desire, say read the Padgett Messages for 2 weeks, then a life situation will happen, I'll bad night's sleep, I'll wake up in the morning, I'll do that tomorrow, and then before I know it, 2-3 months have gone by, and I'm just, the desire just gone. Yeah. So it's kind of like, how do you keep that desire burning, like, or growing? Yeah. That's something I'd like to understand.
Well, it's very similar to having the desire in the first place.
I see.
But so there's the principles I've discussed there, if you think about them, apply even... So if your desire is waning, then there must be an issue somewhere here, mustn't there?
So you revisit back the issue?
Yeah, there must be either an issue where I'm not seeing my own pain and suffering, or what that is, or I must have lost my curiosity, or I must have no longer see the benefits, or I no longer see a purpose to it, I no longer have a motive, I no longer believe it's pleasurable. And so you can see that the reason why a desire would wane is pretty much the same reason why a desire wouldn't be there in the first place. What happens to many of us, though, is we don't understand there's times when we're influenced. So when you come to one of my seminars, for example, I'm influencing you, aren't I? Right? I'm basically, in this conversation, I'm encouraging you to read the Padgett Messages, so I'm influencing you. I even went so far as to make sure you have them in your own hands. You know? Like, that's a fair bit of influence, isn't it? Like, at home you'll get them and you'll put them on your bookshelf or whatever, and you go, he influenced me. I don't think I want to do that, right? But the reality is everything in your life influences you one way or the other, and it can influence you positively towards a loving goal, or it can influence you negatively towards an unloving goal. Frequently, what happens is the influences come to bear, and we don't understand those influences, Perry. It's like we don't understand the reasons why we're now influenced away from the desire. And the actual prayer contains the reasons why, which is very interesting. And, you know, I particularly, this is not the prayer I gave to the people in the first century, by the way. This is a prayer that I gave to James Padgett for modern society. The one I gave in the first century, of course, didn't include some factors that the prayer that I gave to Padgett includes, because I wanted to address some negative things that had developed over the 2,000 years in between with regard to people in their prayer. But for the most part, the majority of the prayer was what I encouraged our first century friends to do. And the prayer itself can help you identify, pondering about it, can help you identify the reasons why desire may wane. And this is a very important thing to do, because if you understand, I haven't sort of read the messages for a week. I haven't longed for God's love for a week. Now, once you feel that, you go, wow, something must have happened this week. If I really understood the benefit of becoming a more loving person, I would want to become a more loving person and receive God's love to do that. So if I'm not doing that on a regular basis, then it means I don't really get it. I don't really understand yet in my heart, in my feelings. I don't understand yet how important it is. Why? What caused the distraction from me a week ago thinking it was important, and now me no longer thinking it's important? And there's all sorts of things that can cause these distractions, which we'll talk about, actually, hopefully, in the next day and a half. Yeah? Yep. But fundamentally, a lack of desire continuing is also caused by the same reasons that the lack of desire didn't start in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right? And as we progress with receiving divine love, you're going to get to the stage where you realise, I'm at a sticky point right now because my desire has waned. Yeah. And why has it waned? Like, what has happened? What thing in life has caught up with me in such a way that causes my desire for love, which I believe is the thing that will solve all my problems, if I truly believe that? What would cause me to not long for it? There's got to be some influence or some external thing or some internal thing that's occurred to allow that condition to develop, doesn't it? And we'll discuss that more. Yeah. Yep.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah, good question. Anna, just straight behind, then we'll come down to Courtney.
Just stay where you are, Nelly.
Just stay, Nelly, if you can hand the mic to Courtney.
So I've got a question about the prayer. When I'm reading it, like, I don't really believe a lot of it.
No,
so
that's right.
Like, greatest of your creations, meh, not sure about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Your wills that become with you, not sure about that either. So it feels
be more
very
clear, sorry. Just read it, because we couldn't hear those words.
Yeah. this part where it says your will is that I become at one with you. I'm like, really?
Really? Does God want me to?
The greatest of
So
her creation.
the problem is when I read this, I feel really disingenuous, and then I don't like that feeling, so I feel like a fraud,
Correct.
and so I kind of just
So
put it to one side.
That's a very important thing, isn't it? Can you see?
Yeah.
And if the majority of us are frank with ourselves, we'd have to probably say, that's true. When I read it, I don't feel anything. Or I feel very little. Right? So that's something that needs to be addressed. Why do we feel very little? What needs to happen so we feel something more than nothing?
And are you stopping yourself from feeling what you actually feel when you read it?
Yeah. And do I need to first own up to what I actually feel? Not that God wants me, but God hates me. Or not that God longs for me, but I don't even believe that God exists. Or, it causes us to have to face up to some truths about what my real feelings were by even just reading the prayer.
Yeah, I can see I can use that feeling of like, oh, I'm not being genuine, so I shouldn't do it as an excuse not to feel the pain that it brings.
Yeah, I would call that an excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. The truth is when you read it, there will be pains triggered. When I say pains, there will be belief systems that you have that are out of harmony with love, which are also always going to cause you pain. They'll be triggered. And most people don't want to be triggered on painful things because we're seeking pleasure rather than pain, right? So most of us go, if it's going to be painful, I just, all bets are off when it's painful. My comfort is now being triggered. My lack of comfort, I don't want to live with. So now it's better just ignore it. It's just a prayer anyway.
And this is when we gave you these prayers, which are actually gifts from other people, but obviously we gave you the messages which the prayer is in. Our intention was not for you to just learn the prayer and take it on like a Christian prayer or an Islamic prayer that, okay, this is the truth now.
So not a rote thing.
It's not a rote prayer. It's not something where you try to reframe how you actually feel. It's almost, I see this prayer as almost like a workshop. Like when I'm really connected to God, I'm going to feel these things. But if I don't right now, then what's it exposing in me? Yeah. So please don't take them home and think, oh, I've got to put it on my mirror and say it every day. And
It's not like that. We're not asking you to be fake with God. We're asking you to get real about, do you think there is going to be a benefit receiving God's love? How are you going to become a more loving person? Do you even have a motivation to become a more loving person? Like I'm pointing out to you, the only way the world can change is for each person in it to become a more loving person. But you don't have to. And if you don't want to, why? Don't you want the world to be in a more loving place? Don't you want your life to be more loving? Don't you want to be happier? Why wouldn't you not want these things? These are things that can cause you to question, why would I do such things? Why would I think such things? And this is the beauty of having the discussion with you, because it can help, fundamentally help us come face to face with the real reasons why we don't have a longing to receive God's love and a longing to become more loving ourselves. What's the reason why? So we see in many of you, like yesterday when we were setting up, many of you enjoy each other's company, right? You get together and you feel excited about getting together and so forth. Why don't you feel that way about God? Is a decent question, isn't it?
I watch you all be curious about, what have you been doing since I saw you last? And what do you think about this? Did you like that?
Did you do this and did you do that?
How often do we say, God, what do you think about what's happening now? What do you think about what I'm doing? What do you think about me? Yeah.
What are you doing? What is God doing?
What are your plans, God? What are you excited about? What do you think about that? What Jesus said last weekend?
We obviously, there's reasons why we don't think God is real enough for us to have that kind of relationship, right? And we need to, if we want to become more loving people, the easiest possible method to become more loving people is to receive love from God. And if we want to become more loving people, then surely putting a desire for God's love should be at the top of our list. And if it's not, when we need to be honest about why it's not. Yep. And the prayer itself points out many reasons why it's not.
So if we have a desire, but we have a block to the prayer, it's about working through the paragraphs and just having it out with God as to how you feel about it.
Well, if you have a desire and you're blocked to the prayer, then you don't have a desire.
Okay.
And that's okay. The key is to be honest about it. Like a person who has a true desire to receive God's love and understands the benefits, they're going to be blocked to the prayer. And they also need to understand what a prayer is. So the very first thing I want to discuss with you after lunch is, what is a prayer? What does a prayer feel like? Because these words are just helping you identify why you're blocked to that. Right? In the end, they're just words, and God doesn't respond to words. So what is the prayer? And this is something we need to be very clear about, what a prayer is versus saying the words.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yep.
Courtney.
Courtney, and then...
My question is sort of similar to Anna's, but I feel like the block I'm realizing I've always had is I just don't believe God's loving.
No. Many of you feel the same.
So I don't know what to do with it, because when I read the prayers and stuff, I just feel a lot of turmoil and sometimes even almost like offended by the idea, and then I just stop.
Yeah.
So I'd rather hear you guys talk about what is loving.
Yeah, but can you see somebody talking about God being loving can turn out to be just a crutch for you to avoid you knowing that God's loving.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times we do this with addictions. We don't want to feel certain feelings, and so then we seek the opposite to avoid the feeling. So for some of you have been coming along to Divine Truth seminars for some time only for the purpose to avoid your feelings, which is an interesting reason for coming, but it's not helping you grow in love. You see, if I'm motivated to grow in love, I will look at all the things that are stopping my desire to grow in love. And if one of my reasons is that I don't have a personal longing for it, and I'm reliant on Mary geeing me up all the time, right? Can you see that's going to be a problem for me, because God's not going to respond to me being geed up by Mary. God's going to respond to my true desire, right? And we notice this a lot, you know, I see it even in workout videos, you know. Most of you don't like working out, right? Because you need to be yelled at in order for it to happen. It's like, get on there, do that, yeah, you know, and G'd up and encouraged, and then you'll do it, you know, that kind of thing. A person with a desire doesn't need that, right? A person with a desire doesn't need encouragement from somebody else, doesn't need to be influenced by somebody else. A person with true desire is internally motivated, right? So if you're not internally motivated, we need to work out why.
Yeah.
David?
All right, I have a question about how to stay in this connection with the Father, because I know the feeling. I had it many times. But the one which I remember very clearly was not long ago. I was outside on a Sainsbury's shop.
Just hold the mic a bit closer.
I was praying then to the Father in a car for His divine love, and it hit me when I was in the shop, which I have about this another question for you, and I was completely different person. I was seeing everyone like my own children, with this, which is not. I know this is not my feeling. I know this is something. I knew this is something from God, and I had like a feeling like in a second I would disappear in this shop. I would nearly feel like a spirit just in this, walking. I didn't know what to do actually. But the state in which I was, I had a question: how to stay in it, because you would like to stay in this relationship with the Father all the time, but I noticed soon when I left the shop, get back to the car, going back home.
Yeah, you're out of it.
I'm out of it.
Yeah.
Where you really want to stay with this connection.
Yeah, but again, there must be reasons why you can't stay in it, mustn't there? Because the definition of being at one with God is to feel it all the time.
Forgive me, brother. This is the question about this as well.
Yeah.
Is the feeling, is it coming to us through our pineal glands, or how come the Spirit of God is touching us? Because what I noticed, this is the feeling which you have. It is clearly in my head.
Yeah,
and I was wondering.
It comes from your soul, and your soul influences. But that's something I don't want to get into, the technicals.
Ah, okay.
But it comes from your soul, and your soul influences both your bodies to have feelings. Does that make sense? So, and we can discuss the details of that later, but probably only when you've received more love to understand it. But it's important at this stage to go, okay, yes, I can't sustain it. Now, even when I think I have a desire, I'm not sustaining it. And there's feelings that come to me, and then I in them momentarily, and then all of a sudden they leave me. Why? Right? Now, there's a number of things to understand about all that, and we hopefully might discuss some of them. First one being is all your feelings are not going to be constant. That's a part of life.
So basically, Father just want to show us how we're supposed to, or this is the target where we show.
Well, I said that's one reason. All your feelings aren't constant. Your feelings pass through you, but that's not the only reason why they would stop. So an example of this, David, is let's say I have a feeling of love for Mary, right? Now, that feeling will only be constant if it's not blocked by any other contrary feeling. So the contrary feeling was Mary punched me in the arm, let's say. and it hurt. And so now I've got a contrary feeling saying, I don't love you very much now. You shouldn't have punched me. You know, that kind of contrary feeling causes then the cut-off of the feelings that I would then have for her, right? And in fact, those feelings get changed in an instant when somebody gets violent with you, right? So there must be reasons inside of us why we can't sustain the relationship with God, because there must be contrary feelings inside of us that cause us to get out of those feelings. And the key is to identify them, to work out what they are.
So God is not withdrawing love in that moment. You are withdrawing from God's love. So it's
for
not,
a reason.
I think you said something about, God is trying to show me this thing. No, God loves all of us all of the time, but we're not always open to that through our own...
I got to correct Mary there.
Desires to love us.
Well, no, it's like there's two parts to God's love. There's the love that God has for us generally, being his children, which are the love he has for you to make sure you're well fed and you're well looked after, all those things. That he has that love. But he also has this personal love, which you don't receive all the time unless you desire it.
Yeah.
Right?
But God's desire to give you that personal love is always there. So
his desire is present.
Yeah.
100% of the time. He loves David 100% of the time. Right? He would like David to receive his love 100% of the time. So if the desires and the feelings wane, there's got to be a reason inside of David.
Is it because I'm still in the sin?
Well, technically, yes. It is because of sin that exists inside of the person, but we need to be more specific, don't we? We need to know what sin, what disagreement have I got with God on whatever matter. And that requires a lot more self-reflection than just saying it's sin.
It's like not living in my own truth, my personal truth.
Well, there's lots of reasons. You could be in an addiction. You could be, because an addiction is a fear, and you could be in fear. You could be angry. You could be sad. You could be. There's a lot of things that are not in harmony with God's love, and you can be in any one of them. Mm-hmm. These are things we need to discuss more, right? What's the time?
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah, I'm over.
Yep.
So we need to finish for the moment. We'll have a half an hour break, so we're back at 20 to 2?
20 to 2.
20
Yep.
to 2. Thanks, guys.